Hi everyone, Trina Phoenix here, and we were going to be getting into stanza 8, which is the love of the heart, and here we go, because we should be done with this pretty quickly. Like I said, it was a pretty short read, but I thought it was profound the way it was explaining our soul's evolution from a process of utter forgetfulness of our heart connection and our intuition, and we were running like a lot of primal codes, and we were running more in our ego codes, and to watch the transformation of a species through enlightenment, awakening, and connecting to the heart and love. These were the teachings of Christ, of Jesus, and this is, we now all have this ability. Apparently, it was very hard for people a long time ago to even get to these parts of their heart because they were so cold from the abuse and the way humans behaved. It was kind of brutal through some of our periods of time. So we're evolving as a species through wisdom and through love and reconnecting to the intuition part of us. So I think that's a beautiful, exciting thing to see and watch and be a part of because, boy, I tell you, I'm seeing an awakening now as to the which I've never seen before. The wave that started in 2008 and hit fully in like 2012, that was a pretty good wave, but not like this one. This one's huge. So we're in one of these awakening periods that we get to be a part of, and it says, basically this is coming from the wheels of the gods. So the gods send this new energy of light through these creation wheels, and it comes down into the hearts and the ones that are ready to receive it. So sorry, I got a fan going and it's making my hair blow like crazy. So the light was beginning to glimmer with new fires blazing in the people's hearts. Fires were carrying the joy of illumination with them, endowing human souls with wisdom and insight. A new rhythm was perfect in tune with the heart, for it brought forth enlightenment to the world. The heart was behaving in very mysterious ways, for it was no longer subject to human control. And if one did not take good care of this sensitive sounding board, it would fall silent forever, handing one over to the cold hands of death. But one would have to learn the language of one's own heart, which alone will make it possible to understand another's heart. Only the heart was capable of rendering assistance in the study of the heart. The mind had to tame its wagging tongue and yield the floor to the silent currents of the heart. Understanding only the language of heaven, every instant it appealed to its owner to speak the same language, the language of love. Those who were closest to the heart were its subjects. Those who had destroyed the invisible obstacle on the way to their own heart became the possessor of the immortal elixir of life. The heart was fully obedient to the man that had overcome all the obstacles to reach it. It gave itself over entirely to the power of those with whom it could converse in the same language. The heart was ready to beat eternally, warming with the currents of love the divine soul, which was following its own lonely path in the world. It was embracing both its owner and those around him with immortal currents of love, and man cherished this treasure entrusted to him as the apple. The apple? The apple of his eye. Understanding that while it was radiating love, he too would live and fulfill the divine mission of love. So I wonder if Adam and Eve in the garden taking a bite out of the apple, that was when they were first coming back into the intuition and starting to reclaim the power of love. Literally, I just saw the Garden of Eden. It was interesting. The heart felt silent at the very moment when it sensed a man was rejecting love. The hand of darkness desired to wind up the invisible mainsprings of such devices to serve her gloomy purposes. They were like bombs lurking in the breast, which would set off explosions, filling all human beings with malicious arrogance and acritable. Through dying away, the darkness had not lost her cunning and inventedness. Many gave their hearts to her hands, for they did not know love. There was still not enough love in the world, and the forces of evil again took advantage of that. Many had tasted the light and knew the power of the life-giving fires. The taste of victory was intoxicating, giving life a new face and making it more attractive than ever before. But the first step taken now called for the second, a higher step. The darkness could still easily sweep away those who had stepped a single rung higher, but those who were already standing on the higher rungs of the ladder of light were no longer within her range. Those robbed in someone else's fiery glow, claiming it for their own, were easily swept away by the darkness. Anyone standing on their own self-raised pedestal could not help but totter. Any human soap bubble resting on them and twinkling with the reflective fires became an easy prey for the darkness. So this was a time when the last of the rubbish was being cleared away, and the remnants of rags from the bursting of bloated beings, they were wiped off the face of the earth. The earth was now wholly exposed to the purifying currents which were wafting through those spheres where the grand gods were rotating the heavenly wheel, assigning to humanity a new period for purification in the fires of love. Stanza 9. The era of wisdom and beauty. Once more, the poets again began to speak, glorifying the kingdom of light. Theirs was the song of immeasurable love, reigning in the heavens. Their hymns to the fire were sung in temples, pouring forth directly from the hearts, enraptured by the ecstasy of love. This must be what we see when people get taken over in church. Now more than ever, the gods knew no rest. More and more, the prayers of the human souls were reaching out to them, pleading for a grant of great love. The world was thirsty and patiently waiting for the decision of heaven. Everyone needed love, and everyone understood that any life without love would be lived in vain. The gods were not stingy with their fires. The fire of the spheres began to approach ever closer to the earth, advancing as a solid wall. The servants of the darkness began to grow anxious. The call of humanity had given the gods legitimate right to increase the rotation of the wheel, which was cutting through the holy fire. While the fire was not dangerous for the people who were yearning for love, he was feared by the darkness more than anything else in the world. She knew that sparks could be extinguished only by human hands, and so she furiously set off to find such human hands. People had become stratified, revealing their inner essence in sharp detail. Many were no longer disguising themselves with the mask of a light bearer. They simply grinned at the world, wholly captivated by the forces of evil. As zealous servants of the darkness strove with their last breath to destroy the foundations of the incipient New World fires, they lent their dirty hands and prepared a blast and scattered all living things to dust. Those who carried out these actions were eager to fanatically follow their idols. Darkness skillfully deployed a rampant aggression, formed a host of conflicts. She needed bloody emanations to multiply her forces, and her servants once again began eagerly to supply it. All over the place there arose an instant of bloody strife, and for one fleeting moment of evil, actually it believed it could triumph. Ideas of good now soared loftily throughout the world. Goodness was attracting not only human hearts but also human minds as never before. The world had grown tired of war. It was now harder and harder to find anybody willing to take up arms against another person. Everyone was longing for friendship and peace. The idea of war had lost all appeal. Evil, in the meantime, was naturally infuriated by these lofty ideas of peace, and found it more and more difficult to count on the new clashes popping up. The world was becoming too kind for that. The new time was marked by a fresh inspiration in the spheres of the arts. Ugliness no longer attracted glances. Human hearts turned to those creations which were of warm tones and goodness, and cordially shone through. Beauty was so desired that in human pursuit of it, the tastelessness of the garish artificial forms and colors was somehow completely ignored. The world quickly realized its mistake. It did not wish to sing out of tune. A new era of beauty was dawning, in which only masterpieces created by the pure contents of soul would be recognized. New sparks of light brought with them new inspiration, and the world was now full of them. The anxiety prevailing in the camp of darkness had reached its limits. Spiteful thoughts of hatred, greed, envy, fear, and such the like were swiftly retreating, finding no shelter in the human mind. People started acquiring wisdom, which was granted by generous love. She alone spoke the language of the heart, and thus comprehended the principles of wisdom. Now that gift was predestined for humanity. The light began to kindle with a bright fire, swallowing up all the delusions of the erring human mind. Man began to discern the true coloring of his own thoughts, and now he truly began to earn the right to be called a Homo sapien. For he had finally realized that he had prematurely considered himself wise, possessing in fact no such gift. The mind began to perceive wisdom, which is always based on love alone. Light ignited the world. Everything appeared in its true color. The world had become clean, bearing the sores that needed healing. They could not be ignored, as they had the capacity to infect everyone with the spores of decay. The next step which humanity was posed to make, as it climbed up the next rung on the ladder of light, would draw a sharp line of demarcation between the past and the future. That was a step in the direction of light, and here there was no place for the past. There existed only the future, pure and bright, with no room for even a single reminder of those old sores. The world was making rapid strides in its evolution. Left alone by himself, man was gaining a knowledge of the world and realizing that it was entirely something within him. As a droplet of water is one with the ocean, its very reflection, so too the little particle called man was a reflection of all humanity. And he knew that in order to refine and purify his fellow droplets, he would first have to refine and purify himself. The purity of water is determined by the transparency of its droplets. Even a handful of dirty, turbid, and stenchful drops can defile a whole fountain, making it unsuitable to drink from, except perhaps for those of darkness, who want to quench their thirst in putrid waste. Man, a drop at once with the whole ocean of humanity, who would have to first purify himself and help in this rescue mission, came through the gift of the light and the purifying flame of love, wherein everything that is needed purification was to be immersed. Man was thus armed with the light of love. A new rotation of the wheel had replaced the old currents with the new ones. Love blossomed out unto the world, unfolding yet another invisible petal of the flame. Love had endless forms and countless currents. Her abilities were limitless, her powers measureless, and her ways unsearchable. The world stood still in anticipation of the secret, hitherto unseen, the unfolding mystery of fire. The gods were bringing into the world an extravaganza of light. Stanza 10. The Divine Humanity. The day of the light had come. The forces of good had triumphed over the forces of evil. Overwhelming majority of earthlings were on the side of light. The souls had opened up to the exalted fires. Many had turned to heaven for help, for only in heaven was salvation to be sought. Thoughts of light, streaking quick as lightning from heaven in response to the call of the heart. It had succeeded in piercing the dark crust around the planet. The darkness had attempted to block the light, but her shield was already riddled with holes. The light was triumphantly breaking through everywhere. I actually saw us light workers doing this while we were breaking through the grid and creating the crystalline grid, the new grid of light. The fire was actually capable of destroying the whole world, but he was the creator, and whatever had been grasped by the hot tongues of the flame by no means disappeared without a trace. It was simply transformed from one form to another, more evolutionary one. The fire had its own plan of transfiguration, and he followed it to the letter. He burnt all the bridges to the past, so that people could not slide backwards and return to the state from which they had barely managed to escape. The cost of the irretrievable sacrifices and suffering. The fire acted only for people's good, and they understood that. The fire creator was in charge of all construction activity. His wisdom permeated all spheres of life, stirring up dissension between the new and the old, the future and the past. It was necessary to separate the wheat from the chaff, the priceless from the worthless. People sometimes grasped at the deceit or the obsolete, trying to conceal it from the scorching tongues of the all-devouring flame. But what they tried to conceal only turned against them, poisoning them with the fetid
stench of decay. Realizing their mistake, they themselves began to bring to the fire whatever they found to be unnecessary on their bright paths to the future. And the fire leapt up joyfully, consuming the dust, and in return, breathing out the gentle warmth of gratitude, embracing those who had given up everything. The warmth and the tenderness of love were like swaddling clothes. To the newborn, a man who had gone through a purifying fire. Yes, this was the new man, born in the flame of joy-filled victory. Many had noticed a certain regularity in the activity of the luminary. This small star, which absorbed the light of other luminaries, was the deepest mystery of all. It was observed every day, but could not be comprehended. The sun remained a puzzlement to humanity, and humanity meditated upon its role. And also in the life of the planet and of the people in general. The sun had opened wide all of its closets of mystery, but to glimpse their contents, one needed a flaming heart that would not fear to step into the scorching heat of the red-hot fire, and there to discover truth. A new round had brought with it new people. They were not afraid of the flame, for they had been woven from it. Their hearts were breathing in the fire. People were saying that there was life on the sun. Their spiritual eye was regaining its sight, and it beheld, through a layer of fire, a multitude of flaming, exalted beings. They could discern that life had extended its bounds far beyond the limits to a single planet. Their consciousness was expanding to hold the new mysteries of creation that was being revealed. Man, who could see for himself, now had access to everything that before was invisible to his blind eyes. The world was infinite and full of life. Everything was conscious and breathing, inhaling and exhaling. Whether it was a flower, a man, a star, or the boundless oceans of eternity, everything was breathing, infused with it life. Man was not alone. He had within himself living worlds. Only the new humanity still harbored within itself the remnants of the past, which were on the verge of outliving their time. The universal law had justly placed them among those who were already considered as belonging to the humanity of the future. For those with hearts open for all to see, it was a tremendous challenge to walk alongside people of the past whose heart was still blind. But the stench of thoughts rotting in the foul miasmas of such darkened minds was making their joint path unbearable for the new humanity. But those committed to the mission of divine love did not have the right to deviate from their designed path or seek an easier way. Instead, they were obligated to pass without fail through whatever length of path that would allow their blind fellow travelers to recover their sight from the bright light. And the heart now softened in the rays of the tenderness of love. It would then have to make its choice to accept the light of love or shut itself up in the gloom of malicious negation. Endeavoring to purify its own ranks and hurrying on the staggers were ones who were still clinging with a long black tail to the thorns of the past. Humanity was taking rapid strides into the future. But that tale was impending, to the point that impatient minds suggested that it simply be cut off. Wisdom, however, indicated that it was already on the point of atrophying and falling off on its own. There were hardly any moments left before man would have almost nothing in common any longer with the animal. Humanity was transforming, and its tail was dissolving. It was transforming itself into its new form, and it was beautiful. Vestiges and throwbacks from the past were disappearing. Inhale and exhale. The hearts kept on breathing in and breathing out in an ever-increasing amount of fire, transforming the inner and outer nature of both man and his environment. Without even noticing it, man was changing for the better, more or less depending upon the intensity of the inhaled fires and the degree of suitability for the given organism. Not everybody could withstand the life-giving force of the flame. An imperfect vessel would be incapable of bearing the intensity, and it would be burnt into small and pinch-black pieces of coal. Those who resisted the new properties of the fire and the surging currents turned into stone, unfit for further evolution. There was a time to cast away stones, and then to gather them together. Now was a time to store up stones for other times when the gods would again begin a completely new rotation of the wheel under an entirely different ray of an entirely different sun. With the help of its other currents, it would again turn stones into flowers and later into those who would succeed in becoming gods themselves. Now the time was approaching when it would be necessary to raise the new stars and subsequently scatter them across the endless firmament of eternity. A soaring of stars. This was the hour especially honored by the gods rotating the wheel. The stars were gathered in the crops, and around them were lining up the whole constellations of igniferous hearts that had soared to great heights. These were the fiery white cores which had flown out of a simple human heart full of love. They were the nuclei of the future giant stars that would illuminate eternity. This was a magical spectacle to charm and keen eyes of the gods. The joy of the spheres. It was limitless. Humanity succeeded in spreading joy to everybody. It was able to purify itself and the spheres around it from the rubbish that had once tossed it out. With a sober self-examination from all sides, it eventually regained its sight, and it could now evaluate properly both the light itself and the darkness around the light. It gracefully accepted the one and rejected the other. Humanity had made its final choice, and the result of light, which the light of the newborn stars, which was the light of the newborn stars. So humanity had made its final choice, and the result, which was the light of the newborn stars. And all the while, the spheres had been filing themselves with a silver radiance, filling themselves with a silver radiance, filling the fresh inflow of the tenderness, divine currents of human stellar love. The world was melting in the fires, dissolving in the fervent embraces of warm and loving hearts. Stones were melting. The earth enveloped in the flame of love. It was losing her hardness. It was becoming gentle. and it was caressing the rays of the luminary. The earth's petrified composition was gradually changing to a softer, more supple form of matter. She gave herself entirely to the fervid hands of the fire, knowing that it was full of love for her. At the same time, she was chastising herself for previously having given herself so thoughtlessly into the hands of darkness. The fire, however, swiftly consumed even this thought, as he could not let them into the future, any vestiges of the dark past. Ahead lay the light, and everything should be surrounded by only the light of love. The earth was melting into the irresistible happiness and joy of love that now filled her. The fire surrounded her with a thick fortress, protecting her from the lustful paws of darkness, and she gave herself completely to his power, to dissolve in him and flow together, flaring up as a single tongue of flame. This was her only wish, and the fire met her wishes. After all, the beloved's one wish is the law for those who love. The gods made an abrupt rotation of the wheel, letting loose the bursting wall of fire, aimed it straight at earth. That was a new round of time, which the people termed Armageddon. The earth had entered into the mystic marriage with the fire, having been betrothed to him ever since those ancient times when the gods had touched the wheels of life in order to make the first rotation. The earth was glowing in the fire of love. Stanza 11. We will pick up with that, and that will be the fire of love. And I bet that is going to be amazing. Wow. Beginning. The number is 101. A throne of angels was whirling round, blessing the souls that were soaring towards the light. The celebration, it seemed, would last forever. Wow. So we will pick up with that next, guys. I love you. I hope you're enjoying this. I think it's wonderful. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful story about creation. And this is a great tool for imagining potentials for our future and where we would like to take things and where we want things to go. And I think this is a great template for looking at ways to manifest a new world, and that's through the power and the wisdom of love. And I mean, it just makes sense to me. So I hope it makes sense to you, and I hope you're enjoying it. And I love you all very, very much. And thank you for being in my world and being a part of my soul tribe. I love you all. Remember, we are the stars. And we came from the stars and incarnated on earth to learn and how to evolve and how to change and transform. And I think we came here to do something really big, was to transmute darkness into light. And we're going to do it. So I love you all, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.